Ruth Yomtoubian is the head of VSP Global Innovation Center. Formerly, she was at the AT&T Foundry, where we first met many years ago through some of the work that Techonomy was doing with Ericsson and AT&T. Steve Sinclair is the SVP of Product and Marketing at Mojo Vision. Some of you may have seen some of the exciting news about the augmented reality contact lens. That's most of the time you're seeing that. You're seeing the talk around Mojo Vision. Prior to Mojo, he was he held product marketing roles at Apple, Google, and HP. So Steve, thanks for joining us. And finally, Dr. Keith Smithson is a leading optometrist from the Northern Virginia Doctors of Optometry, works with professional athletes and sports teams, as well as other high-performing individuals. So thank you all for joining us. Excited about this conversation because I think sometimes our eyes are something we take for granted and realize, it's one of those things. Unfortunately, my grandfather had struggled with macular degeneration, and I saw that as he lost his sight, really a lot of other things started to go, right? As you start to think about his inability to read and stay active, it really changed his life following that. So I think a really important conversation. Ruth, let's start with VSP. I think it's a brand that many people have seen, carry an insurance, eye insurance card, says VSP, but, tell us a little about VSP and specifically about the Innovation Center and its goals.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having us here. We're excited. The VSP Global Innovation Center is barely a year old. We just started last year in the midst of the pandemic. But I just want to build on what you said about performance and the topic being included in this conference. I think some of us are calling it consumerization of health. Some are calling it patients taking responsibility, values-based healthcare, or modern life, we could say, instead of preventative or proactive healthcare. And I think performance speaks to an individual self-optimization as it relates to not just physical, but cognitive, emotional, and really occupational health, which is pretty much someone's ability to do their job and have a sustainable income. So we're seeing a lot of new companies filling this demand with new products. And that's the great part about my role and the role of my team is that we get to learn about these shifts and how they might scale across a 90 million member benefits network. So it's a really exciting time for vision care as an industry and for VSP in particular. This organization is in the process of change and transformation. Again, nearly 90 million members, 61,000 clients. These are companies from tech to government to education, and also has an eyewear and optics business. And it's really an organization going from helping people see to empowering human potential through sight. So consider that more people see their eye doctor once a year than they see their primary physician in a year. Eye professionals are able to detect early signs of diabetes, Alzheimer's through your eyes, almost like a crystal ball. So in addition to these many eye conditions that impact your overall health, we can, like myopia, dry eye disease, we can really unlock further detection around performance in that relationship between the OD and the patient. And so just a little bit more specifically about the Global Innovation Center, we opened up to actively partner to develop these life-improving products, experiences, and services to scale across this large membership we have. And so we're really all about bringing those outside shifts into the line of sight of VSP. We're driving a structured approach to a very complex industry, as we'll get into, talking to some of our partners on the eye doctor side and on the startup side. And so as we know, the startup ecosystem, it's really an open laboratory for a lot of cultural and technological shifts. And so we at the Global Innovation Center are tapping into this open laboratory to scale new tech through our network.
Great. So Steve, as I mentioned in the opening, right, the augmented reality contact lens, I think got a lot of, those people get really excited when they hear about it. David and I were lucky enough over a year ago to see some of the early work that you were doing. Talk a little about why the contact lens. We know there's obviously an augmented reality, a lot of talks about other form factors. So talk a little about Mojo, the reason the company exists and sort of the path that it's currently on.
Sure. I want to thank you and Techonomy as well for having us here, and Ruth and VSP for inviting us to participate in this. So I'm really excited to be here. You're right. We're doing something that's kind of crazy when you think about it. We're building something that people imagine and see in science fiction and in popular culture, of this idea of living in a world where you have ambient information and content that's available to you anywhere. And you have access to it just by looking around, and it's just embedded inside the world around you. And so
I know you hate the analogy, but very Black Mirror, right? Very like you see some of the bad, but obviously there's amazing applications for it as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of companies that see the opportunity for having the right information around you all the time. And we see that opportunity as well. We do think of this as the next generation of computing. If smartphones are starting to plateau and we're hitting, peak smartphone, there's something that's going to come next. And we think that something that comes next is part augmented reality, part medical device, part artificial intelligence. And it's all of those things together. They're going to create an experience that we call invisible computing. And invisible computing is getting the right information at the right time when you need it, but then fading away the rest of the time, so that I can have conversations with people, I can be engaged in the real world without always being pulled away to a screen. And you think counterintuitively, well, are you really solving that by putting a display on my eye? And the answer is yes, because it gives us the opportunity to create a form factor that does blend in with what you look like, allows you to be yourself, allows you to focus on what's around you. And when you need the right information, it pops up, you see it, and then it goes away and you go on with your day. And so the idea of what we're building with Mojo Lens is a smart contact lens that has all the tech built into it, but it's done in a way that allows you to use it whenever you want throughout the day when it's valuable to you, but then be gone the rest of the time. And you can't think of better situations than, say, sports and performance and those moments where you need extra information, but you're in the middle of something, you want to be hands-free and you want to be eyes up and you want to be focused on what you're trying to do. It's those situations where something like this form factor, like a smart contact lens, can really be valuable. And
Right.
so
We've
been hard at work at this for the last 5 years. One of our first markets that we're focused on when we think about health and wellness is around helping people with low vision conditions. And so imagine augmented reality overlays that add edges and contrast enhancements and inversions over things in the real world for people that have lost their mobility and lost some of their independence, so that they could wear something like this and be able to get from home to work or from work to the store, and to be able to do that in a more natural way. And so we've been spending a lot of time to understand those conditions and where we could be helpful for people in those situations to add information that they otherwise wouldn't be able to see.
Right. Great. And I think the idea of, even the title of the session, from low vision to high performance, is, we'll talk a little about how, different solutions and innovation is tackling really specific use cases, including the wide spectrum there. So, Dr. Smithson, I think as someone who works with high performing athletes, and I think you mentioned on our prep call, people like in the military, obviously people who need to have their hands free, to what Steve was saying, and need, access to information. They need better eyesight. What are some of the things you've been seeing as far as innovation and vision in helping sort of these high performing individuals advance their skills or their performance?
It's an exciting time to talk about vision and really kind of reframe the concept of what vision means. I mean, I think a lot of us are comfortable with saying we've been in to see our, annual eye exam, as we mentioned earlier, see our eye doctor and maybe get some new glasses or contacts or some eye drops if our eyes are dry. But, I think the concept of vision is just so much greater than glasses and contact lenses. Vision is a very holistic term. We talk about vision, it's really much more than just, the information we see. So, the eye itself is really, we consider it sort of like a satellite dish, right? We're just collecting information in the eye. So we have to maximize the clarity of the input with the right glasses or contact lenses, but that's really just kind of where it starts. So the conversation then evolves into, muscular coordination and looking at eye movements and eye tracking and making sure we have efficient eye movements to actually follow quick moving targets, as you mentioned, in professional sports or elite law enforcement, military, tactical shooting, things like that. But also for kids that are trying to read, and sitting in front of these computer screens doing digital learning all year like they have, processing multiple moving cars on a highway. There's a lot of things that carry over in everyday life that are more than just having the right pair of glasses or contact lenses. So making sure we have the correct input is important, but some of the things that I've seen that are most exciting is really that integration between what we take in through that satellite dish and how we process that information. So actually taking that information, sending it back to the brain, having the brain interpret the information and tell the body what to do in a quick enough and an effective enough manner to actually complete that motor task. So that's where it's really exciting. And for me, there's technologies that help us to evaluate those very same things. You know, we have things called sensory motor exams, which are ways of looking at more of a functional eye test. How well do the eyes muscularly work together? Do they coordinate together? Do they track well together? We can do that through eye tracking systems like Right Eye and things like that, which is pretty exciting. You know, we have neurological testing systems, so we can look at the speed of conduction. If you think about, you know, the signal strength on your cell phone, you know, I have 5 bars or I have 2 bars. You know, how quick and how efficient is the neurological signal going from that satellite to the brain and then back? So we quantify that in milliseconds on different systems, which is pretty exciting. And I think that's the new frontier for me, is really the evolution of improving that signal strength and getting really the eyes and the brain to function as one unit, because it's much more than just a clear signal.
So it's funny, you know, obviously Ruth coming from AT&T, Steve, you've been in the Valley and tech companies. When we think about edge computing, right? This is as far out on the edge as we can get, you know, really being able to process real-time data sort of as you both take it in, you process it and need to display something. So while the brain's processing it, Steve, you're even thinking about obviously augmenting that processing capability with edge compute as well.
That's right. And Dr. Smithson hits the nail on the head. And we think of it as context, and your eyes are collecting context around you to help your brain make decisions all the time. And so anything we can do to enhance that context, to speed up the processing of that context is something that's valuable in lots of different situations. Again, whether it's someone who is trying to overcome a low vision condition, or a high performance athlete, or a musician, or someone who's doing public speaking, the idea that I can have the right information at the right time and in context of what I'm doing is important.
Great. So Ruth, so far, you know, obviously we've focused a lot on sort of some of these high performing individuals and obviously the application of technology. You know, yesterday at our conference and so far today, we've been talking a lot about the inequality in society and inequity, and really making sure we're addressing all, you know, vulnerable communities. You know, how is VSP thinking about balancing these objectives of, you know, let's say low vision and people who really need access to technology to your point, be a productive part of society, right? To be able to actually contribute and get a job, you know, all the way through, again, these other cases where we're talking about athletes. Is how do you think about balancing as you look at various innovation and startups, you know, the ones you're working with, you know, are you building a portfolio of startups that you're working with to really kind of look at that wide spectrum of applications?
Yeah, I mean, what's great about starting a new innovation team is that we get to be in that learning phase where we're learning on behalf of this vision care company that has such a wide reach. And so what we're seeing is that whether you are low vision or you have 20/20 vision, there are consumers and patients looking to improve their performance, and that vision is critical across that whole spectrum. And there's impacts on your physical performance, on your occupational performance, even your mental health. There's connection between mental health and your eyes. And that could be a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But let me kind of remind us that part of transformation is realizing that healthcare companies were designed for scale. They were designed to serve a lot of individuals at once. And so to provide better value and make sure that individuals continue to prioritize their health, VSP and the Global Innovation Center in particular are focused on creating more personalized healthcare experiences. So we have to look at products for low vision and 20/20 vision, not just for RX, but this is something rather new. So admittedly, the low vision member population is quite small if you think how vision benefits are connected to employment. So we found that technologies addressing low vision, like Mojo Vision, actually could eventually address the needs of a wider segment of our patients seeking to improve their overall health and performance. So that's why we're tracking those technologies, although the segment is very small within our own group at this point. But I think modern life brings new questions about vision health, screen time, overall health trends are showing that people want to be biohacking their own health. They want tracking tools. They're seeking that mental edge not just the physical edge. So I think vision plays a big role in that, as both Steve and Dr. Smithson shared. It's an early warning system for the rest of the body. It's an extension of our brain. There's a connection between the brain and the body that can be strengthened through the manipulation of visual stimuli. So when you take all of that into consideration, we're in the midst of answering these questions to better address the various segments and health needs of a very wide member base. And going back to VSP's purpose of empowering human potential through sight, this can look very different for each individual in our network, from early detection of disease to improving cognitive and physical performance. So
right. And I think
there's a lot of work for us.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about some of the learnings and how you could apply them from a smaller population, and then obviously carry it through the larger people you serve. And we'll put in the chat the report that you recently did, the Futurist report with CB Insights that Mojo's included in, to really show some of the various things that you're looking at as an organization and thinking about innovation around the eye. But I think where we start talking about is this is a medical grade, especially in Steve, in your case, this is a medical device. This isn't another app that is easy to bring to market, and you develop it and you push it out and you continue to iterate software and make it better. This is something that needs to go through rigorous approval processes, including the FDA. How has that process been? I think one of the interesting things we talked about early on was the FDA's sort of feelings around the early applications of your technology and what they would like to sort of prioritize. But talk about sort of obviously you've been at companies like Apple and Google and HP, where bringing a product to market has probably a different path than bringing something that needs to be approved by the FDA.
Yeah, this is definitely new for me personally, and for a lot of us at the company. We're really trying to build a consumer electronics company that has the speed and the innovation that you associate with that type of company, with the discipline and the safety mindset and the patient-centric view that you get with a medical device company. And pulling those two things together is a challenge, but it's also, we think of it as a competitive advantage. And as we're building something like Mojo Lens, which is a contact lens and therefore is regulated by the FDA, we're going to use that to prove that it's safe, and we're going to have the FDA help us do that. We can't announce when it's going to come out until the FDA has gone through all of our testing results and they make the determination that it's safe and effective for what it needs to do. But we're building in the discipline and the team to bring that to market in a way that will hopefully satisfy the FDA. One thing Ruth said was this idea of giving people a performance edge, and we think of that as the invisible edge. And again, you start with a population of folks, like people that have low vision, that don't have a lot of tools available to them today from a technology perspective. And if you can service them, you can learn from that and grow it out into bigger and bigger populations. Next is sports performance. After that might be first responders. After that becomes, the general consumer market. And if we can build a company that can eventually service the 45 million people in the US that choose to wear contact lenses, that brings the cost down for everybody across the board. And so I think the FDA recognizes that type of scale is necessary to deliver a solution for everyone. And the last thing I'll say is that when you build a product that has accessibility at the heart of its design, you're building a product that's going to be good for everyone and better for everyone. And so we're very focused on the accessibility aspects of this for low vision, but it's a medical device that's going to have all sorts of capabilities beyond just vision over time. So we're excited about those opportunities as well.
So there was a question from the audience, as a low vision person, how do I get a set of these lenses? Obviously, there's still a path sort of ahead of going through approval processes.
Yeah.
And it may be a little while until we see them available. Yeah,
it's a number of years of continued testing and prototyping, and then clinical trials, and then submitting to the FDA. But it's not a decade away. It's a lot sooner than that, we hope.
Right. Great. So Dr. Smithson, obviously Mojo is one great example of an innovation like we talked about that may apply early on to a certain segment of the audience, but the learnings will then be applied more broadly. You've seen technologies come into the market that are originally designed maybe for the higher performing athletes or military that then have been able to be used, and applied to a broader population. Talk a little about those examples and what you've seen, how innovation enters the market through a very, a smaller segment of the market and then is expanded more broadly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's been my experience 100%. And I think we talked on it a couple of times about, performance and visual performance. And sort of for me, it's visual performance and maximizing visual performance to maximize human performance, and there's so many things we learn from the performance arena of elite professional sports, military, things like that I work with, and taking those lessons learned and applying them and making them accessible to everyone. So, I think that's obviously what my passion is as well. As a clinician, I've had the great fortune working with VSP for several years with their mobile clinic, getting into underserved communities and doing vision evaluations for individuals that may not have a chance to access a doctor in any other environment. And so we've taken a lot of the technologies that we use to assess elite professional athletes, taking them into an underserved community and finding a child who doesn't necessarily need a pair of glasses to see better, but needs to have their eyes become more efficient in tracking to follow the words they're trying to read in school. And one of the coolest stories I have about that is a child that I worked with a couple of years ago there that, was this, amazing athlete. You could just tell by the way she walked into the room. She just carried herself like, look out, I'm going to play and I'm ready to go. And we sat down, we had a cool conversation. She had significant issues with eye tracking. And, we talked through it a little bit and I said, this is going to be really exciting for your athletic career. I think this is something that could really make you a better player on the field. And she was like, yeah, that's great. I'm excited about that. But, I really want to go to law school. And this is a kid who had aspirations that were much higher than what were going to happen on the field that weekend in the game. She wanted to go to the next level in her career, and her entire, lifelong journey was going to be impacted by the fact that she couldn't stay focused on words that she was reading on a page in front of her in 6th grade. So, there's lessons learned from an elite performance community that were applicable and accessible to everyone. And I think that's where it gets exciting. So for me, there's technologies like that are accessible through tablet-based computer systems that you can take anywhere. I think to Steve's point, the VR, AR environment is something that, we've all become a bit more familiar with. Those are things that were really more directed to elite performing communities previously, but now you have low-cost virtual reality headsets. You have things coming out and new things coming out every day that allow us to train things in virtual environments. And that's exciting. We've all sat, unfortunately, home and alone and in our caves in this last year of a pandemic and had to find ways to stay engaged and stay trained, and so for our elite performers, sometimes they weren't allowed to go into the training facility. They had to stay sharp mentally and visually, from afar. And so they were using virtual reality systems. Some were sports specific, like Win Reality, Sense Arena, things that they could do hockey goalie training and baseball training from their hotel room. They could literally sit there and hit baseballs in a hotel room, which is incredible, right? And so, there's other games coming out that have multi-sensory things. There's React, there's Skyfall, there's things that will have a multi-visual skill environment that can be trained in a virtual world. And training things in a virtual world that have carryover into real life scenarios, again, playing sports, but being successful in school, being safe riding your bike down the street or driving your car down the street, are things where this now applies to everyone in their day-to-day, is maximizing their visual performance to maximize their human performance. And that's where it gets exciting.
Right. So Ruth, and it was interesting, yesterday we did a session on food allergies. And I think one of the interesting things was really, number one, some people don't realize they have a food allergy until it's identified, they treat it late. I think Dr. Smithson identified another, probably there are things that we just adapt and get used to with our eyes, how we see things, how we focus, how we pay attention. On the assessment side, right? So a lot of the tools we're talking about is helping, the tools that'll solve problems. But are you thinking about, really this idea of assessment? How do we get more people to, identify the challenges? And are we using technology and innovation to do that as well?
Yeah, I think actually Dr. Smithson, I'm going to take one of your lines, but he shared that, and many other of our ODs have shared this, that our eyes as an organ are not used to sitting in front of a screen for this many hours. And so that in itself is a massive change that is causing changes in vision that many people won't realize maybe for a few months, for a year, for years. And so it's, first of all, very important that you utilize your vision care benefits and that individuals are able to have that access to vision care, and through that can gain early detection. So a lot of that technology and capability is already there with doctors. What we need to figure out is whether it's partnering with a Mojo Vision or a Quantified Self startup. We have this great futures report we put together with CB Insights to start identifying.
Yeah, it's in the chat. So for everyone who wants, they'll download it as well as in the email that'll go out later today.
Yeah, this is the landscape. So we can't just stay in our lane as vision care providers and say, come into our offices. That's one way that people can improve their performance and prevent early detection. But we are also at the Global Innovation Center trying to figure out how we fit into that larger landscape around performance.
Great. Well, Ruth, Steve, Dr. Smithson, thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned, the report's available sort of through the chat right now. Everyone in the audience will get an email as well. Thanks for joining us for this important conversation. We'll make the video available following the sessions. We'll be sharing that. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.